look at this when I finally get to it. Josh, this is really for you. Genesis Targum, chapter 19, and I'll be reading from some of those passages. And anyways, Shabbat Shalom for the second time tonight. Michael, I hope you're here tonight. Are you here? Are you with us?
Shabbat Shalom. I'm here.
All right. So we have plenty to talk about already tonight. Mary Migdal and pre-existence, but now we're going to be talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. And I hear Michael has tons of notes on this. And what I'm going to be doing tonight is I will read from Genesis chapter 19 from the Targum, and I will be then handing it over to Michael to give his full presentation. So whether it takes 20 minutes, 40 minutes, it's going to be awesome. Whatever it is, he's going to go take us through the notes. And then at the end of it, I will be taking us through different passages that speak of the same thing. So 2 angels came to Sodom at the evening, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw and rose up to meet them from the gate of the tabernacle, and he bowed his face to the ground and said, I beg now, my lords, turn now hither and enter the house of your servant, and lodge and wash your feet, and you will arise and proceed on your way. And they said to him, No, for in the street we will lodge. That was that observation I when I read last time about why they wanted to go in the street specifically to sleep in the beds in the street. We read that in Jasher. And he persuaded them earnestly, and they turned aside to be with him, and they entered his house, and he made a repast for them and prepared unleavened cakes. And it seemed to him as if they did eat. They had not yet lain down when the wicked men of the city, the men of Sodom, came round upon the house from the youth to the old man, all the people throughout. And they cried to Lot and said to him, Where are the men who entered with thee tonight? Bring them out to us, and we will lie with them. And Lot went out to them to the gate and shut the door after him. And he said, I pray, my brethren, do not thus wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters who have had no dealing with the man. I would now bring even them out to you to do to them as is meet before you, rather than you should do evil to these men, because they have entered in to lodge under the shadow of my roof. And they said, Give up this. And they said, Did not this come alone to sojourn among us? And behold, he is making himself a judge and judging the whole of us. Sounds like a lot of conversations I have. But now we will do worse to thee than to them. And they prevailed against the man, against Lot greatly, and came near to shatter the door. And the men stretched forth their hands and brought Lot unto them in the house, and shut the door. But the men who were at the gate of the house, they struck with a suffusion of the eyes, from the young to the old, and they wearied themselves to find the gate. And the man said to Lot, Hast thou yet in this city kinsman or brother? Thy son-in-laws, thy sons, and thy daughters, take forth from the place, for we are about to destroy this place. For the cry of it before Yahuwah is great, and Yahuwah hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went forth and spake with his sons-in-laws, who had taken his daughters, and said, Arise, come forth from this place, for Yahuwah destroyeth the city. But the word was a wonder, and he as a man ranting in the eyes of his son-in-laws. That probably relates to a lot of the discussions we have with our friends and family. They look at us and see a ranting wild man. And at the time that the morning was about to uprise, the angels were urgent upon Lot, saying, Up, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters who are with you, lest you perish in the condemnation of the inhabitants of the city. But he delayed, and the men laid hold on his hand, and on the hand of his wife, and on the hand of his 2 daughters, for mercy from Yahuwah was upon them, and they brought them forth and set them without the city. And it was that, as they led them without, one of them returned into Sodom to destroy it. And one remained with Lot, and said to him, Be merciful to your life, look not behind you, and stand not in all the plain to the mountain escape, or you perish. And Lot said to him, I beseech of thee, endure with me a little hour, until I have prayed for mercy from before Yahuwah. Behold, now thy servant hath found mercy before thee, and thou hast multiplied the kindness thou hast done me in saving my life. And I am not able to escape the mountain, lest evil overtake me and I die. Behold now, I pray, this city, it is a near habitation, and convenient for us to escape thither, and it is small, and the guilt thereof light. I will flee thither then. Is it not a little one, and my life shall be preserved? And he said, Behold, I have accepted thee in this matter also, that I will not overthrow the city for which thou hast spoken, to destroy it, that thou mayest escape to it. Hasten and flee thither, for I cannot do anything till thou hast entered there. Therefore he called the name of the city Zoar. The sun had passed the sea and come forth upon the earth at the end of 3 hours, and Lot entered into Zoar. And the word of Yahuwah had caused showers of favor to descend upon Sodom and Gomorrah, to the intent that they might work repentance. But they did it not, so that they said, Wickedness is not manifest before Yahuwah. Behold, then, there are now sent down upon them sulfur and fire from before the word of Yahuwah from heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and the herbage of the earth. And his wife looked after the angel to know what would be in the end of her father's house, for she was of the daughters of the Sodomite, and because she sinned by salt, she was manifestly punished. Behold, she was made a statue of salt. And Abraham arose in the morning and went to the place where he had ministered in prayer before Yahuwah. And he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah and all the land of the plain, and saw, and behold, the smoke of the land went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it was when Yahuwah destroyed the cities of the plain that he remembered the righteousness of Abraham, and sent forth Lot from the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities wherein Lot had dwelt. And Lot went up from Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, because he feared to reside in Zoar. And he dwelt in a cavern, he and his 2 daughters. And the elder said to the less, Our father is old, and there is no man in the land to come to us after the way of the whole earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and when he is drunken, we will lie with him and raise up sons from our father. And they made their father drink wine that night, and he was drunk. And the elder arose and lay with his father, nor did he know when she laid down, nor when she arose. And it was the day following, and the elder said to the less, Behold, now I lay my evening with the father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, that he may be drunk, and go thou and lie with him, that we may raise up sons from our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also, and he was drunk. And the younger arose and lay with them, and he knew not in her lying down, nor in her rising up. And the 2 daughters of Lot became with child by their father. And the elder brought forth a son, and she called his name Moab, because from her father she had conceived. He is the father of the Moabite until this day. And the younger also brought forth a son. She called his name Barami, because he was the son of her father. He is the father of the Ammonite people unto this day. Thus concludes the reading of the Aramaic Targum, chapter 19. Michael, I'm handing it over to you.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I called in sick last week, and I'm back, so it's great to get back to it. So as Noel said, we're switching the format a little bit today. I'm going to give all my notes at once, and then he's going to read his document that he did. So please take notes. Noel, if you want to interject, if you find something that I say interesting and you want to add more to it, please do. But yeah, so I'm going to start now. So chapter 19, Palestinian Targum. So number 1 says, 2 angels came to Sodom at the evening, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw and rose up to meet them from the gate of the tabernacle, and he bowed his face to the ground. So last chapter, which was probably like a month ago, right? At least 3 weeks ago. I posted this. I'm going to post it again because now they're talking about it. Let's see if it's processing. There it is. Okay, so this is the summary of both chapters 18 and 19. We didn't get to 19 last time, but I did post it. So I just want to summarize. So chapters 18 and 19 should be viewed as a united narrative. The events of chapter 18 in the annunciation of the miraculous birth of Isaac are contrasted with the announcement of the death and destruction of Sodom in this chapter. So chiastic structure time. So if you remember, they arrived at Abraham's tent, Yahuwah and the 2 angels, and remember we had that great discussion. Abraham greets the visitors. Abraham's shows hospitality to the visitors. The announcement of the birth of Isaac. Sarah laughs. Abraham intercedes with God for Sodom. There's 50 righteous. Will you stop? Okay, so now this chapter. So we just read it. The arrival of the Lord's messengers at Sodom. Lot greets the visitors. Lot shows hospitality to these visitors. The announcement of the destruction of Sodom. Lot's son-in-laws laugh. Lot intercedes with the messengers to allow him to go to Zoar. So again, just showing you the similarities between the two, the announcement of the birth of Isaac and the destruction of Sodom. Okay, so Josephus taught that Lot entreated the angels to accept lodging with him because he had learned to be a generous and hospitable man by imitating Abraham. That makes sense. I found a commentary that said the three men visited Abraham at the height of the day. I remember talking about that. That was like noontime. But they visited Lot in Sodom in the afternoon or evening when the light was waning, symbolizing the difference in the lives of the two men and their relationship with Father. So Abraham lives in the light. Lot is approaching darkness of Sodom. Makes sense, not scripture, but it makes sense. Then I'm going to add this to it. Let's see. So this is another commentary on Lot. I thought it was really good. So Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. So as soon as Lot saw them, he stood up to greet them and bowed to the ground. The gate of an important ancient city was an impressive edifice. It was much more than a simple entrance wall into a walled city. It was also a public space where the elders and officials of the city sat on stone benches along the entryway or in the side chambers discussing legal matters and making decisions. So Lot's position at this gate and the way he addressed the men of Sodom as brothers or brethren suggests that he had become a respected city of Sodom, perhaps an indication that Abraham's liberation of the people of Sodom from the Mesopotamians earlier had given him a respected status as a citizen. And as soon as Lot saw God's witnesses, he greeted them with respect, but he only recognized them as human visitors to his city, not as messengers of God. So, as we know, this chapter is the destruction of Sodom, and there's two witnesses. There's two angels. Does that sound familiar? You go into Revelation, there's two witnesses right before the destruction. Or a judgment, right? You need two witnesses before a judgment. I thought that was interesting that two showed up where three showed up for Abraham. Number 3 says in KJV, and he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So KJV does say unleavened bread. I'm going to quote the Passover passage. So Exodus 12 says, "You shall keep it until the 14th day of the month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat. They shall eat the flesh the same night, roasted with fire, and they shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs." Did this happen during Passover week? I would say so. Passover week is very, it's a foreshadowing of Yah's judgment. I know when I was big into the futurism eschatology in the Septuagint, Jeremiah literally says he's going to gather them. So the Matthew 24 verse where he gathers the elect. In the Septuagint, it literally says in Jeremiah, I believe, that he's going to gather them on Passover. Because that's what it means. You have the blood in your doorpost, you're not going to get the wrath of God. Okay, so let's see. So in addition, it's kind of talking about the same thing again, but so the angels came to observe the people of the city, staying in the city square will allow them a good vantage point from which to judge the behavior of the Sodomites. So this was not an ordinary visit, guys. They were coming here for a purpose. So, like Abraham, Lot extended his hospitality to his visitors, making them an evening meal of unleavened bread, the customary bread that will be made in haste when entertaining unexpected guests. So this was nothing new. Most people would have done the same thing. So maybe in that case, it wasn't Passover, but whatever, I still believe it was. So his offering cannot compare, however, with the feast of the fatted calf that Abraham offered his guest. And what they were saying is that's usually the bread, at night, it's usually a smaller meal. When Abraham made a meal, that's usually when people eat their biggest meal of the day during the sunlight, because that's when you're doing all the work. You need your energy. Okay, so number 4, this was really interesting. And it's been so long since I read Judges, but a huge connection here. Hopefully Noel has something on this. Number 4 says, but before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. So that word round led me, during my word studies, to Judges 19. I would highly recommend reading the whole chapter, and I'm going to do a decent job on summarizing it and showing comparisons. But so Judges 19:22 says, while they were celebrating, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless men, surrounded the house, same as round, pushing one another at the door, and they spoke to the owner of the house. the old men, saying, "Bring out a man who entered your house, that we may have relations with him." Does that sound familiar? And the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said, "No, my brothers, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this vile sin." So this was an aha moment, like I said, right off the bat, seeing the similarities between Sodom and Judges 19. Media time for a so this was called the Levite's concubine. It's also known as the Benjamin War. It concerns a Levite from Ephraim and his concubine who travel through the Benjamin city of Gibeah and who are assaulted by a mob who wish to rape the Levite. He turns his concubine over to the crowd and they have relations with her until she collapses. The Levite, sorry, I should have prefaced this, guys. This was pretty graphic, but this is Bible. The Levite dismembers her and presents the remains to the other tribes of Israel, and they're outraged by the incident. They swear that none shall give his daughters to the Benjamites for marriage, and launch a war which nearly wipes out the whole clan, leaving only 600 surviving. They have remorse, fearing that will cause an extinction of the entire tribe. They circumvent the oath by pillaging and massacring the city of Debased, none of whose residents partook in the war of the vow, and capturing 400 maidens for the Benjamites. So, and then I believe either before or after it does say that, not that it matters, but it does say that the concubine cheated on this Levite. Crazy story, ridiculous. Okay, so now I found similarities and differences on this. Similarities. So the setting is traveling to a city, so Sodom and Gibeah. The travelers intended to sleep overnight in the public square. A man in the city invited the travelers to stay at his home. Travelers enjoyed a nice meal in the man's home. The townspeople came to the man's home and expressed a desire to have sex with the male travelers. The homeowner rebuked the townspeople for their vile action. The homeowner stated the protection of his guest under his house. The homeowner offered his virgin daughters in place of the men. The townspeople refused to accept the man's protection of the travelers. The death of a wife or concubine, the sparing of the man's life. The townspeople suffered some consequences for their actions. The moral decay or depravity of the surviving man, Lot, and the traveler. Okay, now the differences. Keeps going. Sodom was a Canaanite city, where Gibeah was an Israelite city. Sodom did not have God's written law, while Gibeah knew of God's written law. The travelers were angels in Genesis 19. The travelers in Judges were a family, husband, concubine, and servant. The travelers in Genesis 19 knew that the city was wicked, while the travelers in Judges 19 did not know the city was wicked. They thought they were going to be around a God-fearing Israelite city. The purpose of the travelers were different, determining the sinfulness of the city and then going up to the house of the Lord. The travelers protected Lot and his daughters from abuse, while the traveler gave his concubine to the townspeople to be abused. The townspeople of Sodom were young and old who wanted sex with the guest, while some of the wicked men of Gibeah wanted sex with the male guest. The townspeople of Sodom were not able to abuse Lot's daughters, but the wicked people of Gibeah abused the traveler's concubine. Lot's wife died from disobedience, while the traveler's wife died from obedience. Lot and his family left the city while the homeowner stayed in the city. The angels didn't commit any immoral conduct, while the traveler committed immoral conduct, sending his concubine to the townspeople. And judgment fell on Sodom by God's direction, apart from the human hands, while judgment fell on Gibeah by the Israelites through human hands. So I thought that was really interesting. I would highly recommend to do a study on that. I didn't have time to go real deep, but I thought that was pretty good to kind of get you started. The similarities between Sodom and Judges 19. And there's all those prophecies with the tribe of Dan and all that kind of stuff. I wonder. Okay, number 12. And the men said to Lot, "Hast thou yet in this city kinsman or brother? Thy sons-in-law, thy sons, thy daughters, take forth from the place." So this was cool. This is Genesis 6 comparison to this, Genesis 19. So they both picture destruction of an evil place, city as a world. The Hebrew word for destruction is shakat. It's used in the same in Genesis 6 and Genesis 19. Elohim said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy or shakat them with the earth." And then on this verse right here, And the men said to Lot, have anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, take them out of this place, for we will destroy or shakat this place. So again, similar, Genesis 6 and Sodom. So in both cases, the Torah will use the same verb matar to describe Elohim's method of destruction. This was cool. This was raining. So Genesis 7, for after 7 more days, I will cause it to rain or matar in the earth for 40 days. And then Genesis 19:24, we'll get to it. Then Yahuwah matard or rained brimstone and fire on Sodom. So again, just similar between Genesis 6 narrative and the Sodom narrative. Okay, number 17. I'm going to drink real quick. Okay, number 17 says, was that as they led them without, one of them returned into Sodom to destroy it, and one remained with Lot. He said to them, be merciful to your life, look not behind you, and stand not in all the plain. The mountain escape you or perish. Here's another commentary. And please, guys, take notes. We'd love to hear about what Noel spoke about earlier, and then this chapter as well, and have a great discussion. So we recall that Lot chose the plain of Jordan for the reason that it was abundant river water supply, alleviated the need to rely on Yah's provision of rain. Abram, however, would live in the mountains of Canaan where he was dependent on the rains of heaven. That was Lot's first mistake in choosing wealth over his uncle Abram. Now take a look at this verse and see that Lot was given the exact same choice again. He's told not to stay anywhere in the plain and escape instead to the mountain. It was a second chance for Lot. He is told to return to the mountain, back to the place of Abraham. Instead, Lot begs later on. Lot begs for a city, Zoar, at the edge of the plain. Zoar means insignificant or small. So Lot wanted everything, and he ends up with nothing. Again, Lot changes his mind. Instead of going to the mountains where Abraham resides, he leaves Zoar and settles with his daughters in other mountains. I'll be talking way more about that in a bit. Number 22 says, hasten and flee thither, for I cannot do anything till thou have entered there. Therefore, he called the name of the city Zoar. So it appears that despite the city's wickedness, Lot was loath to leave. Lot may have been repelled by the sinfulness of the citizens of Sodom, but he was still attracted to the life in the midst of sin. I can relate to that, you know. Babylon has a lot to offer, right? But here's wisdom. Wisdom of Solomon held that wisdom delivered the righteous Lot, who fled from the wicked, who perished when the fire came down. The 5 cities. Someone's talking. Okay, we got it. Okay. Again, Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 10, all about what wisdom did to the patriarchs. In this example, she was the one who winds, and taught that Yah used the east wind to punish the people of Sodom, as well as the generation of the flood, the people of the Tower of Babel, the Egyptians with the plague of the locust. So Exodus, and where they get this from, the east wind brought the locust. Again, I think it fits here. They're basically just saying this is the same wind that destroyed Sodom as well. Okay, so east is righteous versus west going away from the covenant. So that would make sense. Okay, so number 26 says, but his wife looked back from behind him and she became a pillar of salt. So Lot's wife is not named in the Bible, as you can see here, but is called Ado, A-D-O, or Edith in some Jewish traditions. The Hebrew verb used for Lot's wife looking back is tabet, T-A-B-E-T. Her looking back at Sodom differs in word usage from when Abraham looked toward Sodom. His look was sakap, S-A-Q-A-P. The Jewish historian Josephus claimed to have seen the pillar of salt, which was Lot's wife. for what it's worth. I don't know. Okay, so Pam mentioned this earlier about a salt covenant. Post this. Leviticus 2:13, Ezekiel 40-24 make it evident that salt was an important part of ancient Hebrew religious sacrifice. So Leviticus 2:13, and every offering of your grain offering shall season with salt. You shall not allow the salt of the covenant of your God to be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt. Also, salt was always cast on the burnt offering, Ezekiel 40-24, and was part of the incense offered in the temple, Exodus 30-35. Moreover, even newborn babies were rubbed with salt, as we read in Ezekiel. As for your nativity on the day you were born, your navel cord was not cut, nor were you washed in water to cleanse you. You were not rubbed with salt, nor wrapped in swaddling clothes. Salt was also widely and variably used symbolically in ancient Israel. The book of Numbers and 2 Chronicles present salt as the symbol that confirms friendship between parties. Eating salt together is a sign of friendship. So, was Lot's wife a burnt offering? That's what I'm throwing out there. Was this part of a sacrifice that she? I don't know. What is the reason she turned to salt? And then you have later on Yahuwah making salt covenants. I don't know. What do you guys think? Number 27, and Abraham get up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. So I saw a commentary that said the Jewish people, they took this verse, they derived the morning prayer that they always do from Abraham, arguing that within the meaning of Genesis 19:27, stood meant pray. So, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. The Jews took that as praying before the Lord. That's why they have the morning prayer. Okay, word study time. I don't think I've done a word study yet. So 28. And he looked toward Sodom and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And so Exodus 9 says, this is Pharaoh, Egypt time. Then the Lord said to Moses, Yahuwah said to Moses and Aaron, take for yourself handfuls of soot from a kiln, and Moses shall toss it towards the sky on the side of Pharaoh. Then it will become fine dust all over the land of Egypt, and it will turn into boils, breaking out with sores on every person and animal through all the land of Egypt. So they took soot from a kiln, or of a furnace, which is in this verse, and stood before Pharaoh. Moses tossed it towards the sky, and it became boils, breaking out with sores on every person and animal. So again, just linking, doing a word study on this, the smoke of a furnace led me to, they took the soot from a kiln, and we've already talked about the comparisons between these punishments. All right, number 29. And it came to pass when Yahuwah destroyed the cities of the plain, that Yah remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. So another comparison with Genesis 6. A single family is saved. However, Elohim's mercy and rescue is connected to his remembering a single man. So right here, and it came to pass when Elohim destroyed the cities of the plain, that Elohim remembered Abraham. And then in Bereshit 8:1, Genesis 8:1, Elohim remembered Noah. So righteous men are being remembered after destruction. Okay. So Elohim saved Lot. Noah is saved due to his own virtue, but is undeserving. Lot is saved only by the virtue of his relationship to another righteous man who walks before Elohim. We talked about this. Genesis 17. When Abraham was 99 years old, it appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty Elohim, walk before me and be perfect. And I remember I did the contrasting where Noah didn't walk before. I think he walked alongside or something like that. There was a difference there. Okay, I have 3 left, but they're a lot. Well, the first one isn't that much. So number 30, but I'm going to share a lot in the chat there. So, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters were with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. I think we talked about this too last time. So only 2 daughters are explicitly mentioned in Genesis, both unnamed. However, the book of Jasher describes another daughter by the name of Paltith, who was burned to death by the Sodomites for breaking their law against giving to charity to foreigners. If you remember, I'm not going to quote it because it's been so long, but basically in Jasher it says that this Paltith lady or woman was a son of Lot. She felt so bad for how they were treating the poor that she tried to sneak food out there to them and take care of them, and they found out, and they burned her to death. And it was her cry that Yahuwah feared or he heard. Interesting. So even within Lot's own family, he had a righteous sibling or kin. Number 36. So thus were both the daughters of Lot with the child by their father. So since this is the last time Lot was mentioned in this chapter, I'm going to do a lot of comparisons between Lot and Noah, Lot himself, and Lot and Abraham. I'm going to share a lot. Yes, correct. Summary of his bad decision. So he choosing to move east toward Sodom, away from Abraham and Yah. He camped near Sodom. He lived in Sodom. He returned to Sodom after his liberation from the Mesopotamians. In the destruction of Sodom, he refused the angel's command to flee to the hills. Instead of returning to Abraham, he settled in the cave in the hill country. He became drunk and incestually fathered Moab and Ammon. Now, this was my favorite. This will be my favorite slide. Right? It hit me. It hit me a lot. Maybe it'll hit you guys. About living in Babylon. So Lot had moved to Sodom to pursue the good life. He had done well financially. He had a house in a prosperous city. He may have had a seat in the city council. I talked about that. As seen as he was sitting in the city gate, comparable to a city hall. He ends up escaping with the clothes on his back, losing his wife, and hiding in a cave with his 2 daughters, who make him drunk and commit incest with him so that they can have children. Lot is a sad picture of a man who sought to gain his life but lost it. He was saved by the grace, but saved through fire. Sin, stripped of everything, traumatized by the severe discipline of the Lord. That hit me. However, though, 2 Peter does say he was righteous. So 2 Peter 2:7, and delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them, and seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from the day to day with their unlawful deeds. It does look like he made it, but he lost everything in this life. I'm sure some of us can relate. Okay. Similarities between Lot and Noah. Humanity was sinful. The door of the ark is shut, keeping out the wicked. The guilty are destroyed by Yah. Noah and his family escape. Noah gets drunk and his son commits a sinful act. Noah's offspring is cursed. Compare this to Lot. Sodom and the city of the plains are sinful. The door of the house is shut, keeping out the wicked. The cities of the plain are destroyed by Yah. Lot and his 2 daughters escape. Lot gets drunk and his daughters commit a sinful act. His offspring is cursed. Interesting. Some more comparison between Lot and Noah. Share some hot tea with you. Yes, I'm getting over my sickness from last week. So both of them, they both lived among sinful people who were warned by God of judgment. Execute Yah's instructions. Noah did. Convinced family, built an ark for years, gathered animals. What did Lot do? He tries to tell son-in-laws, but his faith is not respected enough to be convincing. He himself hesitates with doubt. Loves God more than he loves the world. Noah did that. Willingly leaves all he loves for the unknown of a floating zoo. I thought that was cool. Lot loves his world so much he doesn't want to leave. He has to be forced, begs to be able to go to another town rather than to the mountains. Has faith that saves. Yes, Noah his faith saves the whole family. Lot, his faith wavers, saves only daughters. Even his wife doubts and dies. Survives devastating judgment. Yes, by flood and by fire, they both did. One. New place. Yes, prospers, but Lot, yes, he has a new life, but he hides in fear. They both were intoxicated. They were both taken advantage of by their children. More so Ham, right? Yeah, him. And the daughters. Both became nations opposed to God's principles and people. Canaan has Canaanites, Jebusites, Amorites, Hittites, and eventually Sodom. Moab means from father, become Moabites. Ammon means son of my people, become Ammonites. And okay. Let's see. So I think okay. So now I'm going to compare Lot and Abraham. I only have a few left. You guys are enjoying this? Usually I don't talk for this long. Trying something new here. Lot. So Abraham was unselfish, gave Lot his first choice of the land. Lot took the quote-unquote best land instead of giving it to his uncle. He took his own resources and rescued Lot after his capture. Lot, no record of him thanking Abraham for doing that. Abraham was immediately responsive to what Yah told him to do. No questions, no hesitating. Lot was hesitating and negotiating with his directives and leaving Sodom, where to go after he left, and all that. Entreated God for others. So it seemed that he had Lot's family in mind when he gave account of the righteous people Yah would save. Lot appeared to be self-centered, concerned with the appearances, never asked Abraham where the angels warned of the destruction of Sodom, and offered his 2 daughters in place of the angels to be ravaged. Tainted by the culture of Sodom, drank too much. Obviously, we know the story there. Be a Lot or be Abraham? Egypt in your heart. You desire what the eyes of the flesh offers. You lose it all. How many of us can relate? Being Abraham, you leave Egypt behind and seek Yah. You desire what only the eyes of faith can see. You get fellowship with Yah and see where his eyes will direct you. Praise Yah. Okay, this is the last thing I have. It's on the daughters. 37 and 38 say, the firstborn bare a son and called his name Moab, the same as the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger she also bare a son and called his name Ben-Ami. The same as the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. So, one more things here. This is 19:7. Lot's older daughter named her son Moab, or of my father. And in so Deuteronomy 2:9 says, Yah told Moses, be not at enmity with Moab, neither contend with him in battle. Yah forbade only war with the Moabites, but the Israelites might harass them. In Genesis 19:38, in contrast, Lot's younger daughter named her son Ben-Ami, or the less sinful son of my people. And so in Deuteronomy 2:19, Yah told Moses, harass them not, nor contend with them. The Israelites were not to harass the Ammonites at all. Did that happen? Ammonites. They were prohibited from entering the congregation of the Lord to the 10th generation. They remained hostile to Israel. Jephthah waged war against them and took 20 cities with a great slaughter. They were again defeated by Saul. David also defeated them and their allies, the Syrians, and took their chief city, Rabbah, with much spoil. The prophets predicted fearful judgments against the Ammonites because of their hostility to Israel. And finally, the national idol worshipped by this people was Molech, or Milcom, at whose altar they offered human sacrifices. The high places built for this idol by Solomon at the instigation of his Ammonite wives were not destroyed till the time of Josiah. So the Ammonites had a very negative political and religious effect on the Israelite people, nation. This all came from Lot's wife, or Lot's daughters having sex with him. And finally, this is what I have left. This is the last one. Moabites. We've all heard about the ites. So they were prohibited again from entering the congregation of the Lord to the 10th generation. They hired Balaam to curse Israel. After the conquest of Israel, the Moabites maintained hostile relations with Israel and frequently harassed them in war. However, the story of Ruth shows the existence of a friendly relations between Moab and Bethlehem. By his descent from Ruth, David may be said to have had Moabite blood in his veins, yet there was a war between David and the Moabites later on. Obviously, I think Ruth was in the Matthew genealogy. Several centuries later, Isaiah uttered a prophecy about Moab, predicting the coming of judgment on the land. And finally, after their return from Babylon, it was Sanballat, a Moabite, who took chief part in seeking to prevent the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Again, just these were the 2 sons, Lot's daughters, and look what they caused. And hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a lot to get through. Hopefully you guys took notes. I'll hand it off to Noel.
Thank you, Michael, for that presentation. Yeah, when I asked Michael if we could change the format earlier this morning, kind of dropped it on him. You know, that's a wonderful thing you probably want to wake up to on your Sabbath. I knew he was sick last week, and I wasn't thinking maybe I could tell he was really pushing to get through that with his voice and getting over the sickness. So thank you again, Michael. That was really great, and I really appreciated that. And for those of you listening, let me know whether you like that better or not. Usually we kind of go back and forth, but you'll see why I chose to do that tonight. Hopefully, I will say before I read the the passages I have. Let me just go ahead and drop this in one more time for those who may have not gotten it earlier. This says Genesis Targum 19, this document, but it actually does not have Genesis 19 in there. It's actually a bunch of other passages that go with Genesis 19. You'll see what I mean. The one thing that really strikes me in this, I was thinking about this earlier this week, that the rapture crowd, I presume that probably everyone here tonight, maybe you were kind of rapture ready at one time. I presume probably everyone here knows that that's not happening. We're not getting raptured out of here before 7 years of terror on the earth. But when I myself was in that rapture camp at one time, and it seems like another lifetime ago now, and it seems like Lot and laughing about, that's one of my favorite gifs of all time, by the way, John Q. It seems like Lot escaping Sodom is one of the biggest analogies or examples used for the rapture crowd. And I want you to think about that, because you go into those circles, and I heard this week after week after week, how Lot escaped Sodom, and that's going to happen to us. And it's like, no, you don't want you don't want to be Lot. I mean, I don't think anyone here listening tonight, we're really struggling over this idea that Lot was declared righteous in First Peter, and it seems like a lot of the people who are declaring that they want to be like Lot, taken out of Sodom before destruction falls on the earth, that it may say a lot about maybe the subconscious or other things that are going on, about how they perceive themselves in the world and their place. Now, keep in mind, like Michael pointed out, Lot, he didn't go to Abraham. It took me a long time before I realized, like, why not? Why didn't now? Part of it could be their family, right? And if it's like the last night on earth, do you really want to go to your like was it your like brother-in-law's house, or however they were related through marriage? And and obviously, a prophet is without honor in his own hometown. Maybe he didn't really honor Abraham and stuff like that. But seeing as how a lot of churchianity identifies with Lot, it says a lot about how they feel about his Torah, his instructions, righteous living, right? They would rather go to Zoar, to this other town. They don't want to go to the mountain. They don't want to go to where Abraham was. And you'll see a little bit more about that as we read through some of these comparison documents. So the first on here comes from the Book of the Cave of Treasures. I was trying to look through different documents on the mentioning of Sodom and Gomorrah. I actually found this really interesting. It says the founding of Jerusalem, and again, this is from the Book of the Cave of Treasures. And in that same year in which Abraham offered up his son as an offering, in that same year, I say, Jerusalem was built. And so the offering of Yitzhak, as you know, happens probably about 12 years after this, or give or take. I can't remember. Or was it, how old was Yitzhak? Well, we'll get to that. He might have been closer to like 20 or 30 or something. I can't remember how old he was, but he was much older. All right. And the beginning of the building thereof was in this wise. So now this is going to seem a little bit odd, because it sounds like he's saying the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah existed after Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. And I don't think that's really what he's saying. I think it's kind of like we'll get to that, right? Melchizedek having appeared and shown himself to men, the kings of the nations heard his history, and they gathered together and came unto him. And it says the names of the kings who built Jerusalem. So look, we see Abimelech. Okay, we'll get to him next time in chapter 20. We see Amraphel, a king of Sinar. We see, okay, but let's look down here. We see, there he is, Bera, king of Sodom. Barsha, king of Gomorrah. Shamir, king of Zobim. And then we can see Tabik of Damascus, which I think Eliezer may have come from Damascus. I think that's a little bit interesting. And then we see this Bactor, king of the desert. I don't know where that is, but I found that interesting that here we see that these, it says these 12 kings gathered together and came to Melchizedek, king of Salem, the priest of the Most High Elohim. And when they saw his appearance and heard his words, they entreated him to go with them. And he said unto them, I am not able to go from this place to another. And they took counsel together about building him a city, and said to each other, verily he is the king of the whole earth, and the father of all kings. And they built him a city, and made Melchizedek to live in it. And Melchizedek called it Jerusalem. And so that's kind of interesting there, that you see, according to the Cave of Treasures, that they are identifying the kings of the plains as helping to finance the building of Jerusalem. All right, the next little section here we see, this is from the Legends of the Jews, the destruction of the sinful cities. And I thought, and now again, I pointed out before that this author is Louis Ginsberg is he's like the Reader's Digest. He's quoting from all different books. He sources Jasher regularly as well as others, and so let's see what he has to say about this. The angels left Abraham at noontime, and they reached Sodom at the approach of evening. As a rule, angels proclaim their errand with the swiftness of lightning, but these were angels of mercy, and they hesitated to execute their work of destruction, ever hoping that the evil would be turned aside from Sodom. That's interesting. And think about that, right? Like they didn't just appear in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They could have disappeared from Abraham and just appeared at Sodom and Gomorrah. No, they took their time getting there. They walked there. That's really an interesting insight. With nightfall, the fate of Sodom was sealed irrevocably, and the angels arrived there. Bred in the house of Abraham, Lot had learnt from him the beautiful custom of extending hospitality. For all the things we could say about Lot, he wasn't too hospitable to his daughters, but he extended hospitality to the angels. And this is perhaps, in where we get in like Yaakov, where he says that you might be entertaining angels and not even know it. I believe that was a Newsboys song from the 90s, entertaining angels. But think about that. Like if the angels ever do show up and you happen to be rude to them or not be hospitable, that could be your life on the line right there. Because he didn't do a lot of good, but you can at least say that he did the right thing to these angels. How many times did he encounter angels in his life, right? On the night they came to destroy the city. And when he saw the angels before him in human form, thinking they were wayfarers, he bade them turn aside and tarry all night in his house. But as the entertainment of strangers was forbidden in Sodom on penalty of death, he dared invite them only under cover of darkness of night. And even then he had to use every manner of precaution, bidding the angels to follow him by devious ways. That gave me a really interesting mental image there about him trying to get him back to his house through back alleyways and that kind of stuff. The angels who had accepted Abraham's hospitality without delay first refused to comply with Lot's request. For it is a rule of good breeding to show reluctance when an ordinary man invites one, but to accept the invitation of a great man at once. Lot, however, was insistent and carried them into his house by main force. And what he's commenting on there is that if you look, it is true that they actually kind of declined his offer right away. And it was insistence on Lot's part at the very least. It seems to me that he may have some truth here, what he's saying, that even they were looking at Lot and going, oh, this is really a righteous man here. Especially if he was on the city council. I mean, would I trust someone in a city council? No. At home, he had to overcome the opposition of his wife, for she said, if the inhabitants of Sodom hear of this, they will slay thee. Lot divided his dwelling in two parts, one for himself and his guests, the other for his wife, so that if aught happened, his wife would be spared. Nevertheless, it was she who betrayed him. She went to a neighbor and borrowed some salt. So there you see the salt connection, and I think some people tonight were commenting on that in the comment section. And to the question whether she could not have supplied herself with salt during daylight hours, she replied, we had enough salt until some guest came to us. For them we needed more. In this way, the presence of strangers was brooded abroad in the city. So in turn, of course, she became Salt. In the beginning, the angels were inclined to hearken to the petition of Lot in behalf of the sinners. But when all the people of the city, big and little, crowded around the house of Lot with the purpose of committing a monstrous crime, the angels warded off his prayers, saying, "Hitherto thou couldst intercede for them, but now no longer." It was not the first time that the inhabitants of Sodom wanted to perpetrate a crime of this sort. They had made a law some time before that all strangers were to be treated in this horrible way. And he's getting this from Jasher, most likely. Lot, who was appointed chief judge on the very day of the angel's coming, tried to seduce the people to desist from their purpose, saying to them, "My brethren, the generation of the deluge was exterminated in consequence of such sins as you desire to commit, and you would have revert them." So right there, he seems to be referring to the sins of the Watchers. That's really interesting that they were trying to repeat the sins of the Watchers. It seems like they, there was a lot to covet before the deluge to be able to say that you had intercourse with one of the Watchers, and also from a homosexual perspective, the Watchers were said to, if you read the book of Enoch, to be a little graphic here, they were said to have horse size parts. So there was probably some good reason from their perspective to want to to lay a hand on these angels. But they replied back, and though Abraham himself came hither, we should have no consideration for him. And keep in mind that they knew Abraham was arguing for the safe haven of these people. Is it possible that thou would set aside a law which thy predecessors administered? The way I imagine the scene going is it's like there's two doors to his house. There's probably a front door to Lot's house, and then a courtyard, and then there's a gate leading up, like a wall with a gate leading up to the streets. And they're actually standing. The people are trying to get through the gate of the courtyard there. They haven't even gotten to his front door of his house yet. Even Lot's moral sense was no better than it should have been. So Ginsburg is not praising Lot either. It is the duty of a man to venture his life for the honor of his wife and his daughters. I would agree to that. But Lot was ready to sacrifice the honor of his daughters, wherefore he was punished severely later on. And Michael already pointed that out, that here he was ready to throw his daughters out to be gang raped. And in the end, the favor was returned to him, and he became the father to his grandchildren through both of his daughters. The angels told Lot who they were and what the mission that had brought them to Sodom, and they charged him to flee from the city, and his wife and his 4 daughters, 2 of them married and 2 betrothed. Lot communicated so now it says he has 4 daughters, according to this. Lot communicated their bidding to his sons-in-law. So I guess that would make 5 daughters in all, because we know one of them was burnt at the stake. So he's got 2 daughters there that are married and 2 that are betrothed. They're virgins. Lot communicated their bidding to his son-in-laws, and they mocked at him and said, "O thou fool, violins, cymbals, and flutes resound in the city, and thou sayest Sodom will be destroyed. Such scoffing, but hasten the execution of the doom of Sodom." The angel Michael laid hold upon the hand of Lot. That's it just comments. According to Ginsburg, it's Michael, and his wife and his daughters. And I actually don't agree with that. I don't believe it was Michael. And his wife and his daughters, while with his little finger the angel Gabriel touched the rock whereon the sinful cities were built, and overturned them. At the same time, the rain that was streaming down upon the 2 cities was changed into brimstone. Remember, we read that in the Targum, where there was initially a rain that came down, and people were like, Yahweh didn't hear us. We can continue sinning. We're being blessed. And then, poof, the rain got turned into brimstone. When the angels had brought forth Lot and his family and set them without the city, he bade them run for their lives and not look behind, lest they behold the Shekinah, which had descended to work the destruction of the cities. I don't know where he's getting that from. I was it was actually the Shekinah of Yahuwah that, according to this, wherever he's sourcing, was descended upon the city. The wife of Lot could not control herself. Her motherly love made her look behind to see if her married daughters were following. She beheld the Shekinah, and she became a pillar of salt. This pillar exists unto this day. Josephus says that, as well as Jasher. The cattle lick it all day long, and in the evening it seems to have disappeared. But when morning comes, it stands there as large as before. The Savior angel had urged Lot himself to take refuge with Abraham, but he refused and said, "As long as I dwelt apart from Abraham, Elohim compared my deeds with the deeds of my fellow citizens, and among them I appeared as a righteous man. If I should return to Abraham, Elohim will see that his good deeds outweigh mine by far." So that's really interesting. Here, Ginsburg is saying that that's the reason you want to go to Abraham, because he's like, I was a righteous man in Sodom, but I'm going to be like a sinner amongst Abraham. I'm not even compared. I don't want to go to that guy. There was probably some, animosity and jealousy and all sorts of feelings too, but he certainly didn't want to fix this. He didn't want to be more righteous. He wasn't interested. The angel then granted his plea that Zoar be left undestroyed. The city had been founded a year later than the other four. It was only 51 years old, and therefore the measure of its sins was not so full as the measure of the sins of the neighboring cities. The destruction of the cities of the plain took place at dawn of the 16th day of Nisan, for the reason that there were moon and sun worshippers among the inhabitants. Now, this is interesting right here. Now, if depending on what moon calendar you fall under, I know that the room is divided. There are some here that claim that the crescent moon is the beginning of a month, and some would say the full moon is the beginning of the month. According to Ginsburg, he's saying that the crescent moon is the beginning of the month because it would be a full moon over the Passover. And keep in mind, he says the 16th day of Nisan, right? So you think of it that what he's saying is when Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, that it was at sunrise, so the sun and the moon were in the sky. The full moon and the sun were in the sky at the same time. And Elohim said, if I destroy them by day, the moon worshippers will say, were the moon here, she would prove herself our savior. And if I destroy them by night, the sun worshippers will say, were the sun here, he would prove himself our savior. I will therefore let their chastisement overtake them on the 16th day of Nisan at an hour at which the moon and the sun are both in the skies. I find that to be a really fascinating passage. The sinful inhabitants of the cities of the plain not only lost their life in this world, but also their share in the future world. As for that's a classic Jewish commentary right there. Trying to decide who gets to enter the future world. As for the cities themselves, however, they will be restored in the Messianic time. Obviously, there's another passage I disagree with right there, because we know that seeing as how Revelation, that's my view. I believe it's Michael's view as well. Revelation was fulfilled in 70 AD, and the ending is that Israel became a wasteland of haunts and demons and devils, and it was not populated nor built upon during the Messianic kingdom. The whole land, it was just a wasteland. So the destruction of Sodom happened at the time at which Abraham was performing his morning devotions, and for his sake it was established as the proper hour for the morning prayer into all times. When he turned his eyes towards Sodom and beheld the rising smoke, he prayed for the deliverance of Lot, and Elohim granted his petition. The fourth time that Lot became deeply indebted to Abraham. So Abraham had taken him with him to Palestine. That was one. He had made him rich in flocks. That's two, herds and tents. He had rescued him from captivity, and by his power he saved him from the destruction of Sodom. The descendants of Lot, the Amorites and the Moabites, instead of showing gratitude to the Israelites, the posterity of Abraham committed 4 acts of hostility against them. They sought to compass the destruction of Israel by means of Balaam's curses. They waged open war against him at the time of Jephthah, and also at the time of Jehoshaphat. And finally, they manifested their hatred against Yasharel at the destruction of the temple. And that's really interesting. I'd never really made those connections, I don't think, before. But that's interesting that, Abraham kept prospering Lot and, doing all this stuff for him. And in the end, you see that there was just this total animosity from Lot's children towards Abraham. Hence, it is that Elohim appointed 4 prophets, Isaiah, Yirmiyahu, Ezekiel, and Zephaniah, to proclaim punishment unto the descendants of Lot, and 4 times their sin is recorded in holy writs. Though Lot owed his deliverance to the petition of Abraham, yet it was at the same time his reward for not having betrayed Abraham in Egypt when he pretended to be his brother of Sarah. But a greater reward still awaits him. The Messiah will be a descendant of his, for the Moabitess Ruth is the great-grandmother of David, and the Ammonitess Naamah is the mother of Rehoboam, and the Messiah is of the lineage of these 2 kings. That's interesting. They, obviously the writer of this does not recognize Yahusha as Messiah, but he at least admits that yes, it's the lineage that we see from Messiah. The destruction of Sodom, Lot's account. This comes from the writings of Abraham. All right, so this one's gonna be a little controversial, and again, I'm not holding a gun to anyone's head. You guys are free to agree with this or disagree. It's up to you guys. Here's what it says, chapter 119. This is the account which Lot told me, Abraham, concerning the coming of the 3 messengers unto him in Sodom. Now, right away, we see an interesting discrepancy here. That all the accounts I read, there was 3 that arrived to Abraham, but then only 2 that went to Sodom. And some of the discrepancies that we see in the writings of Abraham, they're sometimes purposeful. And you'll see one of them in this chapter. And so right there, we see a discrepancy. And it is what it is. It's one of the tensions of reading some of these extra biblical books. So here, the 3 angels, they go to Sodom. For Lot was sitting in the door of his house in the city of Sodom, conversing with 2 of his sons-in-laws who were Sodomites. And there we see right there, right? He had, according to what we already read, he had 4 daughters that were left. 2 of them were married. So he has 2 son-in-laws. They were Sodomites. When he saw 3 men approaching down the street of the city, and the spirit of Yahuwah whispered unto Lot, behold, these are my messengers who bring tidings of salvation. Lot therefore rose up to meet them, and bowing down before them said, behold now, my Adonai, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, that I may wash your feet and anoint your heads and feed you. And in the morning you may go on, leaving only a blessing upon the head of your servants. And they said, nay, but we will abide in the street tonight, for we have heard that it is not safe to enter into the house of a Sodomite, lest we be abused and tortured and killed, and our property stolen from us. So there's a passage right there that agrees with Jasher. But Lot replied, not so, my Adonai, for I am no Sodomite, but a true worshiper of Yahuwah Elohim, and I know that ye are his messengers, for whose Ruach hath shown me this thing. And the writings of Abraham actually kind of puts Lot into a better light, interestingly enough. Then when Lot had confessed his faith in Yahuwah Elohim, the angels entered with him into his house, and he did set before them a feast with unleavened bread and wine. Another passage that agrees with the other text. And they blessed it and partook thereof, and Lot's family also partook and were filled. And notice that the angels did not enter his house until he confessed to his faith in Yahuwah Elohim. When Lot's 2 son-in-laws saw him take the strangers into his home, they went straightway into the magistrates of the city, for it was unlawful in the city of Sodom to entertain a stranger in your home. So here we see the son-in-laws turn him in as well. Which was it? Was it the wife? Was it the 2 son-in-laws, or all 3 of them? Wherefore the people of Sodom surrounded Lot's house, both young and old, all the people of the city. And one of them called to Lot and said, where are the men whom you took into thine house tonight? Behold, you know that it is contrary to our laws to thus entertain strangers. You almost hear the Newsboys songs, entertaining angels. Nevertheless, we will forgive thee, for thou art a mighty prince among us. So that confirms what we saw, that he was, at least a city council guy. I mean, he was a mighty person in the city, probably highly respected. Therefore, bring forth the men unto us, that we may lie with them and do unto them according to all the desires of our hearts. Wow. But Lot went out the door to the front of his house, and securing the door behind him, he confronted the Sodomites. And Lot said to them, I pray you, my brethren, do not these wicked things, for it is contrary to the law of the Most High Elohim, who is king over all, to force anyone to lie with another. Repent now, therefore, that the wrath of the Most High Elohim fall not upon you, and ye with your city be destroyed. But they were angry with Lot, and they cried unto him, Stand away from the door, lest we take thee also. Thou hast come in among us and partaken of the good of our land, and we have treated thee with honor, although thou wast a stranger. Dost thou now make thyself a judge over us? And their anger increased against Lot, and they said unto him, Behold, we will deal worse with thee than with them. It's funny how like all translations, the people say, does thou now make thyself a judge over us? Doesn't that sound like so many conversations we have? Nobody can judge me but God, right? And that should terrify everybody. Like, yes, like that like saying that should terrify, but it doesn't. Wherefore we shall take thee and thy daughters and the men who have come in unto thee, and any others in thine household who shall please us, and we will do with you according to all your desires. But so now here's a kind of a spin on this. I just want everyone to consider this. First of all, I am not taking Lot's side. All right, like he should have defended his wife and his daughters. They were virgins. He should have. They were betrothed. He should have defended them to the death. Right? There should have been blood on that. Lot's blood first if they were coming in to take anyone in his family. But just notice here that there's a slight tweak here where the people are saying, "Look, if you don't hand those angels, those men over to us, we're not only going to do what we want with them, we're going to do it to everyone in that house. That includes your daughters, your wife, everything, everyone. We're going to take them all." But Lot replied, Behold, now I have 2 daughters who have not lain with men. Let me, I pray you, plead with you that ye take them not according to this wickedness and abuse them according to your abominations. For the Most High Elohim will surely destroy the city if ye repent not. And so here he's saying, it appears to me what Lot is saying is, he's saying, do not. It seems like take them not according to this wickedness and abuse them according to your abominations. Now, maybe he's talking about the angels. Maybe he's talking about his daughters. I'm not quite sure there. But he's pleading with them not to do either to anybody, his daughters, the angels, anybody, what they intended to do. Wherefore ye shall do nothing unto me, nor my daughters, nor the strangers that are within my gate, nor any of mine household, for Elohim will smite you in the attempt. So there you see him defending his daughters. You see, it's a little bit different here. They cast Lot in a little bit of a better light. And their anger increased yet more against Lot, and they came near to break down the door. But the messengers of Elohim, who were holy men bearing the power of the priesthood, after Elohim's holy order, put forth their hands, pulled Lot into the house, and shut the door behind him. Then they smote the people of Sodom with blindness, so that they could not find the door. And one of these holy men said unto Lot, Take thou all that appertaineth unto thee, whether persons or goods, or of the city, for the wrath of Elohim is upon this place, and tomorrow it shall be destroyed, because the cries of those who have been abused here have risen into the ears of Yahuwah of Sabaoth, and the abominations of the Sodomites have come up before his face. Wherefore surely upon the morrow the vengeance of Yahuwah shall fall upon Sodom, that neither root nor branch shall be left here, for the fullness of their iniquity have come upon them, and in the fullness thereof they shall be cut off. Therefore Lot went forth at that time and spake unto his son-in-law and his married daughters, and all who had gone forth with him from our camp, from Abraham's camp, saying, Up, get you out of their place, for on the morrow Yahuwah will destroy the city. And remember now, it wasn't just his family, right? There was a lot of people who had separated from Abraham's camp. Nobody ever thinks about what happened to those people. But he's trying to plead his case with them too. And they were all with Abraham. They all saw Abraham's righteousness. None of them left. But his words were foolishness unto them, and they mocked him. And Lot returned into his house in sorrow. When morning came, the men of Elohim hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wives and thy daughters who are here with thee in the house, and depart hence, lest he be consumed by the wrath of Elohim, which shall be visited upon the iniquities of Sodom. And while they were preparing to depart, Lot's heart being full of sorrow at it leaving his daughters and his daughters' children to be destroyed, the men of Elohim took him by the hand with his wives and his daughters. Yes, it says wives, plural there. For Yahuwah had mercy upon Lot because of his integrity, because he had not bowed down unto false Elohim, nor entered into the abominations of Sodom. And Lot thought to dwell in Zoar, wherefore he hastened there. But his wife Ado turned back into the city of Sodom. I think that was the same name that Michael was commenting on. Ado was the daughter of Eli, the son of Eliezer. So she is the granddaughter of Eliezer, which explains why Eliezer and Jasher was going to visit Sodom. He had family there. I mean, his granddaughter was married to Lot, which Eli had accompanied Lot to Sodom. And Ado thought upon her parents and her daughters who remained in the city. Her heart was pained within her, and she turned back unto them and was lost. But Lot entered with the rest of his family into Zoar and was there when the cities of the plains were overthrown. Then the 3 holy men of Elohim came unto me, Abraham, where I was fasting and praying, nigh unto Sodom. And they lifted me up into the heavens and taught me the ordinances, the key words, and the things by which I might call down fire and brimstone upon the cities. And I did as I was commanded by the angels of Elohim, and the cities were destroyed. So as I commented before, it's kind of interesting that this has Abraham, he didn't want to, but he prayed the prayer according to this that brought the cities down. And when I saw the destruction of the land, mine heart was sorrowful, but Yahuwah said unto me, I have had mercy upon Lot and have sent him out of the city that he was not destroyed, for he was the only righteous man in all the cities. Wherefore mine heart was comforted. And when we're almost through with the writings of Abraham. And when the destruction was over, Lot feared to continue dwelling in Zoar, lest it also should be destroyed. Wherefore, which kind of goes with the account of legends of the Jews, like he knew it was a ticking time bomb, like it was going to be destroyed. Wherefore he took his family and went into the cave of Adullam and dwelt there. And the word of Yahuwah came into Lot, saying, now here's the controversial part, all right? And people are going to do, I don't know, flip out over this, but I'm just the messenger reading this. Go in now unto thy 2 daughters who are with thee, who have not known man, for they shall conceive by thee, that thy posterity shall not be cut off from the earth. Now, I am reading an English Targum of another book, and a lot of times these translators, they have been caught time and again putting in very provocative things and to turn heads, get attention to their translation, that kind of thing, and then it chases off the scholars and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what this is exactly what it's saying. I find this difficult to fathom that Yahuwah is saying, go sleep with your daughters. It seems to me that what he's giving him a foreknowledge that it will happen, which it can still be said that he didn't know that they did it when they did it. But he's basically saying, look, this is going to happen. It's almost like you wanted to, it's a cause and effect. You wanted to hand your daughters over. You know what? This is what's going to happen. That's how I take this. You guys are free to disagree. So Lot went in unto his 2 daughters and lay with them, and they conceived by him. See, it seems so like he went and laid with, he did the act. And clearly, guys, any reading of Genesis, Jasher, any of these texts, it says the opposite is true. And so this is one of those things where it's like, really, like, if the writing of Abraham is a forgery, why did they phrase it that way? Why would they do that? That doesn't seem like that would sell the book for them. And the firstborn bare a son and called his name Moab, and the younger also bare a son, and she called his name Benami. And Lot dwelt in the cave for 5 years, and after that he took wives and his daughters and his sons, with whom his daughters had born unto him, and dwelt on the other side of the Jordan. And Yahuwah blessed him and prospered him, and he dwelt in safety. Okay. And I'm going to skip that. And then, I'm not going to read the part from let's just read it. Let's read it from Yasher, chapter 19. It's a short little thing, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you for sitting through story time with me. And so again, chapter 19 of Jasher. And the angels rose up from the door of Abraham's tent after they had eaten and drunk, and they reached Sodom in the evening. And Lot was then sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when he saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed down to the ground. And he pressed them greatly and brought them into his house, and he gave them victuals, which they ate. And they abode all night in his house. And the angel said to Lot, Arise, go forth from this place, thou and all belonging to thee, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city, for Yahuwah will destroy this place. And the angels laid hold upon the hand of Lot, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hands of his children, and all belonging to him, and they brought him forth and set him without the cities. So this is interesting here. It says, according to Jasher has a habit of this. It has a habit of including more people than the other books document. Like when you read the Noah's Ark account, it sounds like there's more people on the ark that left the ark than Noah and his family. You can read that for yourself. It's very interesting. And here it says, it mentions him, his wife, and his children. He doesn't say 2 daughters. He just says children. And then all belonging to him. Well, who's all belonging to him? We're not told. Were these some of the people that were in the camp of Abraham? Well, we're not told. And they said to Lot, Escape for thy life. And he fled, and all belonging to him. And then again, and all belonging to him. Who's all? Is it just his 2 daughters? Who are these people? It sounds like a group. Then Yahuwah rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah and upon all the cities brimstone and fire from Yahuwah out of heaven. And he overthrew these cities, all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. And Addo, the wife of Lot, there's her name again, Addo, looked back to see the destruction of the cities, for her compassion was moved on account of her daughters who remained in Sodom, for they did not go with her. And when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt, and it is yet in that place unto this day. And the oxen which stood in that place daily licked up the salt to the extremities of their feet, and in the morning it would spring forth afresh, and they again licked it up unto this day. And Lot and 2 of his daughters that remained with him fled and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and they remained there for some time. And Abraham rose up early in the morning to see what had been done to the cities of Sodom, and he looked, and behold, the smoke of the cities going up like the smoke of a furnace, which is a stunning picture, if you can imagine that I think depicts, judgment and the finality of death and destruction, including the eternal soul in Gehenna. And Lot and his 2 daughters remained in the cave, and they made their father drink wine, and they lay with them, for they said there was no man upon earth that could raise up seed for them, for they thought that the whole earth was destroyed. So that actually gives, remember now, they went to Zoar first. He went into the town, and then they left. They saw other people there, but that town, we're not told if that town was destroyed, but apparently they were under the impression that it was going down there too. And it probably had already happened. And they both lay with their father, and they conceived and bare sons. And the firstborn called the name of her son Moab, saying, From my father did I conceive him, for he is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And then we see Benami with the next. And verse 60, and after this, Lot and his 2 daughters went away from there, and he dwelt on the other side of the Jordan with his 2 daughters and their sons. And the sons of Lot grew up, and they went and took themselves wives from the land of Canaan, and they begat children, and they were fruitful and multiplied. So that concludes all the readings, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the comparisons, and there were some things that didn't agree in those passages. It is how it is when you read through these extra biblical texts. That's all I have to say. Michael, did you want to add anything?
Oh, no, ready to open it up.
All right. So handing it over to you guys. We had plenty to discuss tonight, and I don't know how Michael made it through that. I know he was really struggling. My voice is shot, so handing it over to the jury.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both again. Just tremendous amount of detail and effort and research and work goes into what you both do, and I just want you to know that I appreciate it so much. I just have a quick comment about Lot. And even though we have extra biblical texts and we can read some other things, to give us other details, it's still not going to be completely clear why he did what he did, why his daughters did what they did. But it just come back to the fact that it was Yah's plan. It was under Yah's control. It was under Yah's purpose, because those two daughters did need to produce children that went on to become very important in the line of succession. So even though oftentimes I'll read and be left with a complete lack of understanding as to why, and why would he open the door and offer his daughters up, all of these things. I think again we're missing some context, where probably missing quite a bit of the story. But yeah, this one's always stumped me, but I really appreciate discussing it, and I love listening to all of your opinions. And again, I just so excuse me, I'm still sick. I so appreciate all of the effort that you've putting into everything. And Michael, I'm sorry you're so sick. It's tough, but again, just thank you so much.
I hope you get better, Sarah E. And here's if I could try to crawl into the mind of Lot from the information that's given to us, here's what I think was happening. Now, I will again state that there should have been blood on that, door. Now, obviously, the angels would have stopped it, but Lot should have defended his family, right? His wife, his children, but also recognized that he wanted to live in Sodom. In fact, he didn't want to leave the cities of the plain. He wanted to go to the next city, Zoar, right? So he liked, as wicked and evil as those places were, he liked it there. And so he was thinking in terms of the laws. Now, one of the reasons he lost a daughter already, she was burned in the pyre. We read that in Jasher a few weeks ago, about how she was feeding the man who came the bread. They caught her. They burned her at the stake as a result. So I think what he was doing I feel like he was offering his daughters in recompense for the lives of the angels. He's saying, look, these are your laws. You're demanding a life. Well, let me give you a life for a life. And so I think that's what was happening. That's just, my 2 cents.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. And thanks. I appreciate that. Those 2 cents.
As usual, I really thank you guys for all the work that you put into these studies, and it's just so sad that right at the beginning, we had a visitor, I believe, that came out right and said blasphemous, blasphemous, and I think left right after that. And I'm like, it's a study. For somebody to do that, and that's the problem with most of Christianity. They hear anything other than what they believe is the scriptural word of God, and automatically they start yelling blasphemy and heresy. I want to hear it all, because there's no doubt in my mind, if we do studies, that these books have been altered. They've been added to, they've been taken away from. If they weren't, we would have never been given the warning. If they were the perfect words of God, that warning would have never needed to have been put in there. But yeah, it was just sad that person didn't stay long enough to actually hear the teaching.
It was kind of my understanding with Lot's Lot's daughters, of why he offered them up. Just from my perspective, is that that he was trying to appease the people, and that he knew that they would never take his daughters because they were after men, like because it was a homosexual city, and that they were, perverse in that area, and that he knew that they wouldn't take his daughters. I know it's kind of like a, think, oh, well, I'm going to offer this to you, but knowing that they're not going to take it. But I think in his mind that he was thinking that I know they're not going to take them, but I'm going to offer them just so they would just leave us alone, thinking maybe that they would leave them alone and that they weren't going to take the angels. That's how I have always seen that verse.
Well, for me, I think he didn't have an understanding of really who the angels were and how powerful they were. And because they were his guests and it was his duty to protect them, he offered his daughters up in place of them.
I've always wondered why they didn't, Lot and his two daughters never went and looked for Abraham. Like Abraham couldn't have been that far that they couldn't have went and searched him out.
Right. Well, that's a really good point, right? And yeah.
How did Lot end up in that area to begin with?
Chose it.
Well, yeah, he chose it. So if you have to go back a few chapters earlier in Genesis, they come out of Egypt with great wealth, and this was the incident where Pharaoh took Sarah, and he was convinced that Abraham was her brother, and there was like plagues that went through the lands and whatever. He got Abraham got Sarah back. She was untouched, and basically they cleaned house. They got a lot of the wealth in Egypt, and so now Lot's a really wealthy guy, and they come back into Canaan, and they're just not getting along. Lot's people and Abraham's people, and so Abraham says, "All right, look, our guys are. I wish we could get along. But whatever land you want, I'll give it to you first. Even though this land was promised to me and my children, you take whatever you want." And Lot, he chooses the land that is like it gets destroyed, but he looks to the land which back then Sodom and Gomorrah and were the 5 cities, right? The 5 cities of the plain. It was described as beautiful and as lush as the Garden of Eden. Very, very lush, very beautiful, very green, and so he went there to live in those cities, and obviously Abraham wasn't going to live there to begin with. Clearly, he was opposed to Sodom, so it's an interesting thing, interesting to see happen. That here Lot is causing strife, division, and he's the one that wants to go live in Sodom. So.
There's this couple on YouTube that they're American, but they're Israelis, and they take hikes around the area of Sodom and Gomorrah and other places in the Middle East. And they actually said, they pointed at this tower and they said, that's Lot's wife. It's supposedly Lot's wife. And I'm sure it's still there at night, but and it's probably not Lot's wife, but there's a legend that it is. And it's a really great channel. If I can remember how to find it, I'll share it on with the group. But it's quite interesting. They go to a lot of places that archaeologically have a lot of rich information. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen, of course, the picture of Lot's wife. I've tried to find on a map where they claim that is. I'm very, very skeptical of that. Yeah, I kind of, even from a mud fossil perspective, it's like, yeah, that looks like a person. First of all, she would be a giant. First of all, now I'm not against that idea. They could have been much bigger back then. I've tried to find how tall she truly was. I've seen pictures of people kind of standing near the mountain. Nobody goes is really going up to it. They're able to like point at it. So I'd like to get a size comparison. Was she a 15-footer, a 20-footer? How tall? What are we looking at here? But I am fully convinced. I didn't talk about this tonight. I am convinced that Ron Wyatt's discovery of Sodom and Gomorrah is legit. And those cities, you go there, like you can find the brimstone, and it's everywhere. And you could see ziggurats in all the buildings of the cities. I mean, that is legitimate Sodom and Gomorrah. And the Israeli government, they want nothing to do with those finds. You won't find any archaeologists there. You won't find any tour guides there. You go to Answers in Genesis, they just they said they were mocking that discovery, and they even claimed that they didn't even look into it. They wouldn't even bother looking into it. And, like, that's pretty crazy to think about. Like, when Zionism doesn't want you to look into something, all the people who are run by Zionism, they go along. They don't challenge. All I have to say is that I would like to find if this so-called statue of Lot's wife is in proximity to Sodom. How close it is? Where do they? I would think that they would not be close. I almost feel that the official narrative is trying to pull people away from those actual cities. That Josephus said the buildings remained there in his day. That you could go still see the buildings that were destroyed. And so anyways, yeah.
Oh, what'd you think of the Judges 19 and anybody else as well? Comparison to Sodom. That was the first time I really came across that.
Well, that was the first I'd heard it too. That was excellent, investigative work. Yeah, so I'm curious what you guys thought. Anybody here? It seemed like you guys were chatting it up during that segment and really enjoying it.
What was it again?
Just a comparison between Sodom and Gomorrah and Judges 19, which was Levite's concubine story and Benjamin War that I shared earlier, if you remember.
Right.
I can post the summary again.
That's where she was cut up into several pieces and left in various locations.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a pretty gruesome story, Michael.
It really did always has reminded me of the Sodom and Gomorrah story, actually, now that you mention it, with the way that angels were treated. That's fascinating.
The way I viewed the Judges story, that I always looked at it as like kind of like a foreshadow of Israel's adultery, and that it was her being cut up and being spread over to all the the tribes, and that was like a metaphor of Israel being scattered into the nations, and that they would be all broke up. That's kind of how I've always saw that analogy, is when she was cut up like that, and that Yahweh was trying to make a point that this is what was going to happen to Israel.
That's actually that's really cool. I like that. I think it's very it's sort of like like you said, a wake up call to all the other tribes, however they perceived it, because it's so shocking. It's like a terrorist act. It's like such an extreme way to get through to somebody, but it worked. Hey Noel, I have a pressing question about what I've heard you say about your testimony and being born again and all that. And I understand as a new Christian at 49, I became a Christian. I'm now 60, and I went to church, and I was really shocked at how irreverent and everything was. And I got saved outside of the context of church, and I had this amazing experience where something fell upon me and something came off of me, and I heard a voice say, "I know you," and and my life changed after that. So I know that if there's a thing called being born again, that was definitely it. And if there isn't, then what was that?
Well, so yeah, you're describing. Okay, so when we're talking about born again, it's almost like it, it's what am I thinking here? So I believe that there is a time where the Ruach Hakodesh comes upon people, and that enters our lives, and so on and so forth. And there are those saving moments. I had an experience when I was probably 9 or 10, and it's when I was baptized. I think I was 9 or 10, and I remember I came up out of the water. I confessed in front of the crowd. I came up out of the water, and nobody had to explain this to me. I remember walking out of that building feeling like I was just, I don't know what was keeping me off the carpet. It was just, I felt like I could feel this joy bubbling up within me. I knew that was the Ruach HaKodesh, that there was just this overjoy. And so we all have those experiences. Now, I do not personally believe that um, in the once saved, always saved doctrine, meaning that if somebody confesses their sins and repents and declares Yahushua to be their savior when they're 15 years old, that they're good to go. I've talked to people that this should really frighten people when they really analyze this. I've talked to people who told me, no, whatever you say, I don't care, because when I was at junior high camp, I had a religious experience, and I know that when I die, keep in mind they'll be like 45 years old or something, and I know when I die, I'm going to heaven because I had a religious experience when I was 15 years old. That's not the way it works. You look at Scripture, you look at Revelation. It's those who persevere into the end. We could live a life for Yah. We could declare Yahuwah and his son Yahusha. We could be obedient to his ways, and then we could walk away from it. We could stumble, we could fall, and we could just throw it all away. And that would be a tragedy. So basically, to answer, if you're getting my opinion on it, I have no problem saying that what you experienced was a legitimate experience from the Most High. I've had them, and so on and so forth. I don't really fall into the born again camp, because when I look at born again, and again, these are fighting words for some. That's totally cool. Here's my take on it. When Yahushua talked about being born again to Nicodemus in John 3, he was referring to the resurrection. This is when our literally the new covenant, the renewed covenant, is at its fullest, according to Jeremiah, that it is offered to the house of Israel or house of Yehuda. It is on our heart. Everybody knows the name of Yahuwah. Everyone is keeping his Torah. We are resurrected in new bodies. That is the born again moment. We are new spiritual bodies, and we are no longer sinning. So it's almost like maybe a preview of the born again moment. And I think we all have those, but I don't think it's the born again moment. Was that confusing? I tried to lay that out as simply as possible. And if you disagree, I don't, it's totally fine.
No, it's great. I knew there had to be some great logic behind it, because everything else has made sense so far. And also, I've always been extremely uncomfortable in church with people coming up to me and asking me the litmus test. What's your testimony? And when I told them my testimony, they didn't want to hear it, and they made them very uncomfortable. And they didn't explain why, or they didn't argue with me or tell me I was wrong. They just got frustrated and walked away. And I was surprised, but also like, figures. But I really felt like what happened to me was so organic, because I wasn't going to a church, and I was just reading the Bible, and I recognized that I was far from holy, and I wanted to be with God, and he made provision for that. And that's how it all kind of clicked in for me. Now, I was 49, not 9. And so that was, for something to happen to an adult like that, a middle-aged person, it has a way different repercussions than if when it happens to a child or a teenager. And it's just it's just really awesome. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here with you all right now. So I'm very grateful.
You know, when this is one of the reasons that I can't judge a person's heart is that when the Father gets a hold of us, when the Ruach HaKodesh gets a hold of us, um, we were all in. If everyone in this room looks back at the horrible things they've done, the things in their lives where they were at, you know, probably a lot of you probably wouldn't even want to confess to those things. They were very embarrassing, and we were very immature in our faith. And Yahuwah came and got a hold of us when we were in, you know, coming out of the pigsty, basically. And so the that's the thing about salvation. But you can't just people can't just say, "Well, he saved me when I was in the pigsty, so I'm going to continue in the pigsty." No, that's not the way it works. And so a lot of Christians, it's funny how Yahuwah he designed the world so that we're all parents. I'm sure a lot of the people in this room have children or have had children. Maybe they're grown up now, and you can reflect back on what it was like trying to raise them and how they fought against you the entire way. Like if it was up to them, they would just eat potato chips on the couch playing video games, and just day by day, that was their entire life. That's all they wanted to do. And you're as a parent trying to get them to grow up, to mature, to be responsible, and they're just like, you know, it's like, oh, it hurts, stop, you know. And yet we don't roll this over to see how this is how it is in the spiritual walk. The Father is doing the same thing with us. He's like, okay, I came to you when you were an immature little child. I want you to grow up. And a lot of Christians have this attitude, I don't have to grow up. I don't have to be responsible. I don't have to be mature or obedient because I've got grace. I know that's the trigger word for a few of you in here. We encounter that a lot. And so the thing is my point here is that when we're looking at different people in the walk, we can't know. We can kind of look at where they're at, but we don't know where they're going to be, right? We don't know how they're going to grow, and you know, and that's one of the tensions in all of this. And but it's frightening to me when I see so many in Christianity. You know, you get their testimony, whatever. So many in Christianity who they are offended at the idea that you would want to be obedient to Him, that you would want to grow up, act mature in the faith, learn scripture, do what it says. And they're offended by that because they're like those children who just want to eat potato chips and, you know, play video games all day and think the Father is going to be okay with that. So thank you for listening to my rant.
No, that was awesome. And exactly, I totally have experienced the same thing when I went to church. It was like there was a lack of recognition of how important everything that they were saying they were dedicated to was. And, you know, it just seemed silly with all the worship team stuff and everything. It was just so, and also the alienation. There's nobody, unless you know somebody, you're an alien until you stay there long enough to annoy people enough to have them get to know you. But I was just like, okay, I know this is messed up. It isn't the way it's supposed to be. But I also know that I have this new commission from God to live a holy life. So I thought going to church was a no-brainer, but it turned out to be really not that way. So, but I appreciate your time, Nolan. That was a really great explanation. I'm giving you a big hug. Take care.
Yeah, I don't want to, you know, it's I always want to put out there that one of the things that within Christianity, now keep in mind modern Christianity is a mess. They can't even define themselves anymore. I mean, it's in shambles, it's broken. But as Christians go, there are so many Christians out there who they don't have a knowledge of Torah. Their theology is wacky and terrible, and so on and so forth. But they have a love in their heart for Messiah, and they love others, and they, you know, they feed the hungry, clothe the poor, take care of the widows. They do the things that are very dear to the heart of Messiah, and in those ways they will be rewarded for those things, even though that they are maybe, you know, lack of knowledge in other things. And then you see on the other spectrum the people who are very knowledgeable of Scripture, and they have a lot of hatred in their heart, a lot of jealousy, a lot of issues of rebellion and those kind of things. So it's not just knowledge, right, that saves us. It's a love for the things that is dear to Messiah. I just want to stress that with everybody. That's one thing that you do see in the church. I know people in my life that they are so indoctrinated into thinking that they are not to obey the Torah. That they're afraid that if they obey it, they'll be spitting on the cross, and they love Messiah so much they don't want to do anything to hurt him. So why they feel like it would be a betrayal to him, and they've been lied to, and that's left up to the Father to be the judge of who's going to make it in the end, right? He might be like, look, you've been lied to about this. You thought you were doing the right thing. You did the wrong thing, but you had a heart for me, for my son, and you loved others and welcome into my kingdom, right? Like that's the tension we're living in here, as we take this narrow path and not knowing really who's going to, make it in the end. So, but again, though, John makes it clear in First John and others that he who oh man, it's getting late, guys. I was just reading First John today, and I love that book. It's my favorite book. And basically, those who sin is a transgression of the law, and those who continue in sin, transgressing the law and claim they know the Father, are lying to themselves, and they don't. So that's the other dangerous place to be in. Does anyone have anything on, now that we're kind of moving on from the Sodom and Gomorrah portion, does anyone have any thoughts on what I went over with pre-existence, and also with Mary Magdalene, who I believe is the best candidate for the wife of Messiah? I do believe he was betrothed, and that it was a very human thing and a very holy thing. People feel like Yahushua would be less holy if he got married. And I'm like, really? Like, that's how you perceive this? You think that marriage is an unholy act, that Elohim would do something and ask us to do something that, he himself wouldn't be a part of? I find that very hard to swallow. But I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts on that. It does appear that, somebody did get upset tonight, and, they were kind of trying out the group. They got insulted, and I think it was over the Trinity statements, and they called me a blasphemer. And that's a hard discussion to have with Trinitarians. To a Trinitarian, that's like the if you leave the Trinitarian doctrine, you are leaving the umbrella of the Christian church. It is a doctrine that is so cemented into their consciousness that if you do not accept that, you are not saved. You don't have the Holy Spirit. You are a blasphemer, so on and so forth. And I remember in my upbringing, I would, be told this. I would be told that that all the evidence out there that points to the fact supposedly that there's not a Trinity, that's a test of your faith. It's there so that you don't stumble. You need to stay in these parameters and accept the Trinity. I've told the story in this group before that my wife, Sarah, when one of her very good friends who loves Messiah, very indoctrinated into not accepting the Torah, but she has devoted her life to doing the things Messiah has asked us to do. And when she found out that Sarah was not a Trinitarian, she was really worried about her faith. Like she was, she had fallen and stumbled. And so, she sent her a book on the Trinity. She said, "Can you read this book?" And Sarah agreed. And so she started reading the book, and the guy's whole argument was like, well, God is so freaking genius that it only makes sense that he would have a Trinity. And if you can't understand the Trinity, it won't make any sense to you because you're not as smart as him. So you just have to accept the fact that the Trinity is legit. Now, if anyone is a Trinitarian in this room, forgive me. I am not trying to squash on you, and you have a right to your views, and we can all discuss those. But that seems to be the argument I was given my entire life. I remember in high school going to like mission camps and stuff, and you would always see the teenagers having they start like crying at some point, and they would be like, my whole faith is in question. And you would ask them why. It's because I can't understand the Trinity. And then the counselors would come in and be like, well, it's like an egg, and you're like, wait, what in the world? And it's one of those things that just doesn't make sense to me. But when I understand that the son is literally a son, that it's not just a title, it's not just a decorative badge that he wears, that he's literally the only begotten son of the Father, and that there was a time when he didn't exist and then he did, and that he is that the Father is his authority, and he's obedient to the Father, and he learns from the Father, and he everything he has told us and shown us came from the Father. That makes so much more sense to me, and that just makes the Bible so much more clear. And anyways, enough of my ranting. Handing over to you guys again. Let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, your question about Mary Magdalene, like, I'm not gonna lie, I do have a bit of issues with that. I mean, I don't know what it is or what offends me. I wouldn't say I'm offended over it, but maybe I'm just kind of more indoctrinated on it. I'm not 100% sold on it. I know I've read stories and stuff about it, and there's been lots of kind of commentary, and they made that movie a long time ago. I forget who did it, about Mary Magdalene. I mean, I don't get offended, like, people believe in that, but what do you think? Did you think that they had children?
So so this is one of when we get into this discussion, what you mentioned, the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, and then Ron Howard made it into a trilogy of films starring Tom Hanks. I think that did huge amount of damage to this discussion. Now, it made it popular, but I think it made it popular for the wrong reasons. And then about 20 years ago, when Dan Brown, and it always came up at Thanksgiving meal and Christmas, and, it offended the Christians. It's a huge offense, and it's something people like roll their eyes at now. Oh, we went through this 20 years ago. We disproved this, Noel. The whole, the Holy Grail was their child. They had a daughter apparently named Sarah, and what have you, and it's this lineage and all this kind of stuff. And in my opinion, that is where we don't have the information to back that up. I personally think it was the Freemasons putting it out there, and I think that they were trying to control opposition. They were trying to muddy the waters, dirty it, and make it very unattractive. They were trying to defeat the issue by putting it out there, in other words. And so here's to give a review of what I think happens. I think he was betrothed. I think that his wife, his betrothed, resembled very much like Hosea, when he was told to go take an adulterous bride. I think that how Yehuda is called the whore of Babylon in Revelation. Now, I'm not calling, just so we're clear, I'm not calling Mary Magdalene that. But there does seem to be a lot of things happening that resemble, that kind of overlap in themes of what's going on, and especially since the temple controllers brought this adulterous woman, who multiple accounts all seem to agree that this was Mary Magdalene, that this was the Mary, the brother of Lazarus, the same Mary who washed his feet. It seems to me like there's a lot going on there, that about Yahusha's forgiveness of our sins, and taking a woman that was perhaps impure, that he had forgiven of her sins. And remember, he put a big emphasis on that when she was washing his feet, and giving the nard, which the nard ceremony, the only other reference we can get of that in Scripture was in Song of Solomon, and it was the night of the betrothal. It was a very, very sensual act that she took her hair and she started washing his feet. And I know that, like, people, like pastors, will go in front of churches and go, now, I know your mind's going in a perverted place here, but it's perfectly normal for a woman in the Middle East to, take her, hair out and wash it. It's like, really? Was that really like just a, common thing? And keep in mind the reason, like the Pharisees were flipping out in the room, and they're going, "She's a sinner. Don't let her do this to you," right? And they knew what was happening. There was a betrothal that was about to be come to fruition. Now, I don't know whether they had children or not. I'm not following the whole Holy Grail bloodline as put forth by Dan Brown and some of the Freemasons out there that have really pushed that. I think that it's the tragedy of his life, right? The best man was killed off. Yahusha, he could have brought in the kingdom right then. Judah rejected him. He was brought in on his parade route, the triumphal entry. They were declaring him to be Messiah, their king, and within 1 week he's killed off. Right. So I don't know whether they went through with it or not, but I highly do speculate that there was a betrothal that came to fruition the week of that he was betrayed, that it was Mary Magdalene, that she was his wife, and as I pointed out in my paper in my presentation before, it's very, very interesting the exchange between them in the garden. They're alone in the garden together, like a husband and wife, and it seems to me that it's implying that there had been intimacy between them already. That it was interesting that the first person he wanted to see when he resurrected was his wife. He didn't go to anybody else. He didn't go to his mother. He didn't go to his disciples. He went to the woman he loved. And that's my position on it. So, and this is one of the things I'm really sensitive about putting this out there, because there's these ideas put out there that Noel Hadley runs a cult. You guys have probably all seen the comments, and the cult mentality would be that if somebody disagrees with me on this, they're out. And people are like, I got to leave this group. I can't take it that Noel thinks that Messiah married somebody. How dare he think that, right? And if you guys disagree with me on this, I'm totally okay with this. All I can do is present the information. I'm very sensitive to this. There's a reason I put this off and haven't shared it, and there's a reason I did that video privately, because I was really concerned with how people would take it. And so it's out there now. It is what it is, and I'm going to continue looking. I'm convinced that the only daughter of Elohim, the only begotten daughter of Elohim. I did that presentation a year ago, and I wasn't. People took it way better than I thought they would. I'm convinced that the only begotten daughter of Elohim is Mary Magdalene, and that Yosef and Asenath is an allegory for Messiah and his wife. So, I think it historically happened with Joseph and Asenath, but it was pushing forward to what happened with the patriarchs happened with Messiah. So anybody want to jump in?
I never saw. I'm just gonna just kind of piggyback on what you were saying there. I never saw the movies. I don't know. Like, I just asking myself the question, like, why do I feel like that couldn't be true? Or, I mean, I'm not opposed to saying, and I get what you're saying. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't leave your group because you believe that. It's ridiculous. I mean, but I do know that people would say, oh, this is a cult. But I think that this is what this group is for free thinking and kind of like understanding some of the things that have been hidden from us. And we don't obviously need to agree on absolutely everything. And I'm not saying it would be impossible. I just find it quite curious. And I just have to ask myself the question, why would I be opposed to that thought? Maybe I'm just indoctrinated thinking that, coming out of the church and that just that ideology, he just was never married. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's right. It's interesting that, like, well, yeah. I was going to say something and then I forgot, probably because it's getting late. But yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. It actually kind of makes a lot of sense to me, because it seems like it could be their coming together could be like the holy rectification of what happened in Genesis 6, where the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and that was an unholy thing. But perhaps Yeshua and Miriam, that would be like the holy rectification of that, if that makes sense.
Well, and keep in mind too that Yahusha is the second Adam, right? He is the high priest over humanity, and Adam was the first high priest over humanity. Of course, he failed, but he was given a wife. And the thing is I don't know why it is so ingrained in us that ultimately sex is bad. Marriage is just it's just there to stop our urges and keep us under control. And it's like, no, like marriage was ordained as above, so below. If we can understand that the father, that the Ruach HaKodesh is the mother of Yasharel, that all came through them, the father and the mother, that why wouldn't Yahusha, their son, be given a bride as well? And I know that there's a lot of kind of hoops to jump through there, because you have to work past the Trinity. You have to kind of look at, okay, I could see that there being a feminine Ruach HaKodesh. She is wisdom. She, you go through that whole study. We've been through some of that, and I'll be revisiting that hopefully soon in the future. And that the father and the mother would want to model that. If they're going to have their son, their only begotten son, be the high priest, why not give him a wife like Adam had? And as I go forward and I'll be looking at more stuff, I think that there's also some interesting themes to be found in remember when we went through the only begotten daughter of Elohim, there was this idea that this only begotten daughter, whoever she was, had sinned, had done something terrible, had repented. Her name is penitence. And we did a whole study on penitence and all that kind of stuff throughout Scripture. So, yeah, anyways, I could go on and on and on. And I personally love this discussion. I will also add that I have never seen the Dan Brown movies or read the books, and I'm not going off any of that research. I'm trying to remember how it was that I was actually turned off by the idea for years as well. And I finally started having a breakthrough this last summer when I was reading Song of Solomon. And I was reading about the nard, and I started looking it up. And in Song of Solomon, if you read commentary on it, all the commentators, and I know that's overgeneralizing, but all the commentators that I could find would say that was a betrothal ceremony. And I'm like, wait a second, that was a betrothal ceremony? And then you jump over to the nard incident in the Gospels. They're like, oh, no. It wasn't Song of Solomon, but clearly it could not have been a betrothal marriage ceremony, because, that's Messiah, and he wouldn't have done something like that. But if we're to compare Scripture, it's like, and then what's interesting too is that Pamela in this group, we were discussing, she was incredibly helpful, and we were reading about how this woman who was Solomon's first lover, first bride, I did a whole thing on that, and I wrote it into my paper. There's an incident where the king's men come, and there's a comparison where the king goes, Solomon, he goes off to the garden. And while he's off in the garden, in Song of Solomon, his friends, his entourage, they basically become drunk. They're drinking, they're heavy eating, they're thinking the enemy is not going to do anything. They can let their guard down. And while that happens, the king's lover is sexually assaulted by the king's men, not his entourage, but these people within the gates, within Jerusalem. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Because we've got the nard incident, we've got the lover who is sexually assaulted while he's off in the garden. And then you see the same thing. It says in John's account, Yahusha goes off to the garden, and then he comes down and he starts teaching in the tabernacle. That's when she's brought forward. In the Song of Solomon account, it talks about how she goes before she's apprehended by the bad guys. She goes looking for her lover, and she starts asking around for him. And I wonder if that's the same scene that happened with Mary Magdalene. She wakes up, and she's not under guard. Like, she's not being watched by his disciple. She goes out. She's looking for him. Have you seen my lover? Where is he? And then they see that she's alone, and they make her move. And I think that that's what happened. So anyway, any other thoughts?
Yep. Been waiting a while. Here's my 2 cents worth. There is no doubt in my mind that Mary was extremely special and he had a special love for her. But where I have a problem with this, if he had lived long enough, there probably no doubt that she would have been the one that he would have chosen. But because that he knew that his time was short and he knew what his purpose was there, I don't see any reason in the world why he would have betrothed her or would have married her in any way, shape, or form, knowing that he was going to die very shortly. That part just makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
Well, he knew his kingdom was coming. So the idea would be is that she would become a widow. And I think in future studies, I'll actually be showing this theme, that it actually can be found in Scripture, that she, the former sinner who repented became a widow. And I believe that in his kingdom, in the millennial kingdom, that he, the king of the earth, would have had his bride, and he would have taken his bride. So.
This brings up a good discussion I've had before and studies is about Yeshua being born of a virgin. And I've done some studying, and I'm caught in between whether Mary was a virgin or he actually came from Joseph and Mary. And if Yeshua impregnated Mary, then that would make even more sense if Yeshua, was born from two humans.
Now, this is, of course, for all of you to discuss. Just so you guys know my view, I have held to the virgin accounts. The whole idea of a maiden. You look into the word. Why did they translate it virgin? Should they have? She was it Alma? I think that's the word, which means she was a maiden, a very young girl. It seems to me that, in fact, all the Jewish tradition leading up to Messiah, if you read the commentary, they agree that an Alma would be a virgin, because why would the sign be for a young girl that wasn't a virgin? Like it's implied by the very name that that's the miracle, that's the sign. I mean, it's like, okay, so what? The Messiah came from a young mother. Whoop-de-doo. I'm sure a lot of people were born from a young woman. That was very common back then. But no, because even remember, Rebecca married Yitzhak when she was 12 years old. That's a young Alma, but that wasn't the sign. The sign would be a miraculous something happening from a young woman. And the in the LXX and other translation, we look back there, they clearly called her a virgin. And the reason why academia as well as Judaism has done a flip now, and they've tried to argue against that, is because of Messiah. And when you look at the a lot of the traditions, like you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, you look at a lot of the stuff coming out, where I talked about Noah being an angel. I did that tonight with Yitzhak being an angel, and this idea that that's also this one flipped. I'm sorry, it was Yaakov being an angel, and I mentioned a few weeks back the tradition that Yitzhak may have only had a mother and not a father, and that I know people did a tailspin there and flipped out. But there's some interesting things to this. One is that the ancient commentators amongst Judaism had this total understanding that Elohim intervenes throughout history. He superimposes upon humanity, and he puts in a higher being into the chain link. And he does this miraculously. And they believe that the Messiah would be this through a virgin birth. And it wasn't until after Messiah came along that all of a sudden they're like, nope, we don't believe that anymore. We're going to throw out all those books. We're going to, anything that can disprove, if it proves Messiah, then we don't want it. So anyways, all that to say, I believe that the virgin account is legitimate, and that was a part of the miracle. And yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Yeah, I agree with what Lisa just said. Oh, that was a really good point, by the way. She just said virgin birth is the only way to have a second Adam. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if someone could argue it any other way, but that's a very good point.